Hello, everyone. My name is Swamp, and it is Saturday night. I'm still not exactly sure what I'm going to be doing with Saturday nights, but the living room stream I think is working out. Where we watch something together, you know, nice and chill. I will get into starting to do games again, but I keep putting it off. Maybe sometime soon I'll be able to do Hogwarts Legacy. We'll see. We'll see. All right, tonight, I thought we would watch a documentary called Affirmation Generation. I only just found this, like an hour ago. So yeah, we'll see if it's any good. It's supposed to be about, I guess, people who regret the transgender thing that they've decided to do, the detransitioners, whatever they want to call them. People who realize that they were duped. Which is funny, but ultimately it's just sad. Without further ado, let's rock and roll.
It is the latest fight over transgender rights.
Two rallies, two opposing messages in downtown Nashville tonight.
I will do it.
Oh, hey, I was at that rally. I'm probably in there somewhere.
That we protect our children. State Representative Elizabeth Guzman's proposal.
Oh, and yes, you're absolutely right.
Crime for parents
Grandpa Jones is an
their
absolute
children's
Chad,
gender
for sure.
Protesters in Texas rallying against alleged child abuse
That gets the most comments of all the stuff on the wall. I think that's the Grandpa Jones gets the most comments.
From the assertion that sex and gender are two different things, one biological and one socialized, to some asserting
shit,
that
let me turn off
biological
my
sex
music.
is either
My
not
bad.
real or on a spectrum.
There we go.
We introduce some people who are called detransitioners. These are people who are choosing to reverse the process.
Hormones do have implications. They have long-term effects, and they have, and of course,
God, that
surgery
absolutely
has
crazy
lifelong
person.
effects. They're not reversible.
That's the person that was
Medical
on
experts, including
What
the
is a
American
Woman
Academy
from
of Pediatrics,
Matt
say
Walsh.
gender-affirming
God,
care
that dude's
is
nuts.
safe and best practice for transgender patients.
NHS advising doctors not to encourage children to change their names and pronouns.
To everyone celebrating Transgender Day of Visibility, I want you to know that your president sees you.
And it's okay to ask questions about
Your
something
what was
that's
that?
very
Your
new and
president?
involves children. The
Your
answer can always
president?
be that anyone from a
Classic Joe.
marginalized
Classic
communities
Joe.
automatically right, trump card, mic drop, end of discussion. Because we're literally experimenting on children.
So the puzzle is, why out of nowhere in the last decade have we seen a sudden and sharp spike of teenage girls who have no childhood history of gender dysphoria suddenly deciding they're trans, often with
I
their
know.
girlfriend?
It's an absolute mystery. An absolute mystery. Some stock footage. Nice, nice.
The best way that I can describe dysphoria is one night I remember having a dream that I was a boy. I felt so happy after waking up from that dream. It just felt like I was excited to be alive.
Are they saying that
and then I got up
that's her name,
went and looked
or
in
she
the
now
mirror.
identifies as a cat?
and just
You
that
never know
happiness was,
nowadays. You
like,
never know.
crushed. So as a child, I was somewhat gender nonconforming. When I was really little, I used to dress up in my dad's clothes. But
God,
things
I
didn't
hate
get
when
really
they say
bad
crap
until
like that.
puberty,
That,
and then
that
I just started
I
to
was
feel
gender
very
nonconforming.
uncomfortable in my
We got to
body,
stop
very
using all of
uncomfortable
this
with
language.
things that were happening.
It's absolutely moronic on
As
every
soon
level.
as I can remember, I'd always had an issue with my identity, mostly the way that I looked, talked, dressed. I think it got into my head growing up I would be happier if I was a woman. I would be more
Yeah, who knows how
satisfied
that
with
could have gotten in a
myself if
kid's
I was a
head, you know?
woman. I would
It's not like there's a bunch of people out there actively pushing that very idea.
As a child, what I didn't know, I didn't call it internalized homophobia because I didn't know the term for it. But that's when I started noticing the stigma over homosexuality. I recognized the guilting, the shaming of same-sex attraction within society and culture alone.
So my whole growing up, from a very small tomboy child until I was almost about 30 years old, I thought that I was what we used to call a transsexual.
It was from the age of around about 3, and it just didn't feel right in my brain. What the hell am I, a girl? Something's gone wrong here.
That always seems wrong to me. At 3 years old, I'm just not buying it. That sounds like an implanted memory to me, that you have convinced yourself that at 3 years old, come on, what are you talking about? I just don't buy it. I'm sorry.
Stuck with my body.
When I was about 15, I started really getting into like self-expression, and I sort of opened up out of this sort of depressed shell I was in. But with that identity expression came exploration of gender identities, which I learned about on Tumblr.
Oh, of course.
And at school,
Tumblr, the ultimate
Club.
birthplace of all this crazy nonsense. That's where they now talk about being wolves and cats and hawks and all that stuff.
And specifically, I was on Tumblr.
Always Tumblr.
And that's probably the very first time I ever heard the term transgender and had an idea of what this concept of gender identity meant. I felt like it answered questions. It answered the question, why was I being bullied when I was in elementary school? Oh, it must have been because I was transgender. Why didn't I like dresses? Why didn't I want to wear makeup like when every other little girl did? Stuff like that. I was just like, oh, all of this is because I'm transgender.
How
Like,
come
so
these
many of my friends
these
are
people always act like they're the ones that are completely they're breaking the gender construct and the gender binaries, yet everything they do is completely related to gender stereotypes. Why didn't I like dresses? I must be a boy. Rapid onset gender dysphoria.
2013,
Oh god.
one after the next teenager was announcing a trans identification in numbers that greatly exceeded what would be expected. And it was apparent that these kids were all from the same friendship group.
This has
Oh,
been
cringe.
documented not only at clinics in the United States, but also across
You know,
Europe.
it's photos like that if they hadn't done all the crazy stuff and the surgeries and hormones, that would just be the regular cringe photos you have of yourself as a kid. That we all have, but they somehow let it become a whole thing. And like, it's not entirely their fault, obviously. It's
so then when I was 13,
it's definitely
I
a
was
sickness
browsing the web one day and
in humanity
I found
right
a
now.
forum for female to male people, and it had tips on how to pass. It had people telling their stories of transitioning and saying that they'd had chest surgery, that they used to have female genitals and now they had male genitals, and just
Well,
the way
that's
they were
impossible.
talking about it, they made it sound like it was entirely possible to change sex.
Now just know, like, how truly easy it is for you to go and get treatment if you live in an area with informed consent treatment. I literally...
How come every time
made
they
an
show
appointment with the
Joel, they
doctor's
show how many
office,
followers he has?
in
What's up with that?
Chicago. I live in Indiana. So I drove up to Chicago. I went to a doctor's appointment that I had set up for 2 weeks prior. Like, it was very quick. And then that day, I received estrogen.
I don't think that many people know
Joel
that
is
young people
a
can walk
biological
into
male.
Planned Parenthood.
He's transitioned back.
many
That's
different
why he seems.
states
That's why he
and
seems
just
gay.
Walk out with hormones. but the Planned Parenthoods are operating on what's called an informed consent model. And if they sign a piece of paper saying that they acknowledge the risks, then they can be given these powerful hormones with irreversible side effects.
I attended a support group for people who were thinking
Look
about
at
whether or
this
not
person's
they wanted
hair.
to transition.
I mean,
And
this seems to be a
within that
very
group,
common thing. A big red flag if you like to know someone's trans is their hair looks like this. It's very gross. Apparently, taking the wrong hormones messes up your hair. I've noticed this all over the place.
Two therapists that were running that
Male to female and female to male. It seems to do
one
that.
day they said, we have this clinic that's sort of down the road. Their resident doctors are looking for patients that their resident doctors are looking for transgender patients. They want experience with transgender patients. So I saw one of those therapists for probably about an hour, and he wrote a letter recommending testosterone for me.
The therapist said I'm automatically transgender, and she does not want to gatekeep me on anything. And she had my letter to transition right away after my first session with her.
My parents took me to a gender therapist, and what I think they thought would happen is that this person would work with me on my gender issues, maybe get to the root cause, and maybe I would end up being trans, maybe not. But what happened is they took me to this person and he affirmed my trans identity within 2 appointments.
At least this cat person has one of the better detransitions. I mean, she doesn't look terrible now.
I start
A lot of these
testosterone.
people, when they try to go back, they look like that Michelle person where the hair just looks god awful and their face is not shaped right. I'm not making fun of them. It's genuinely a depressing thing. It's really, really fucked up they do that to people.
My voice started to drop, which excited me because I'd always wanted to be able to sing lower notes. For the first couple of months being on testosterone,
They're always, and it seems like so many of them are theater kids, man.
I felt
Just
very
nerdy
energetic,
theater
almost
kids.
euphoric. I enjoyed the changes that were happening to my body at first.
Of course, you're playing freaking Radiohead, and I probably can't even play. I should probably turn this part down so I don't get in trouble with YouTube for, you know, playing a cover. That's what we're getting away from Over the Legal Limit. All the copyright claims.
That I had this label of like androgyny and being genderqueer.
The first
God, Radiohead
few years,
sucks.
it was novel. It was very interesting. All these changes happening to my body. They were things that I was okay with, that I was happy with at that time.
Hey guys, it's Ren. Today is October 8th, 2010, and I'm 1 week on testosterone. I'm 7 weeks on testosterone.
Of course.
A little over 10 weeks.
Of course, this person chose the
I would
name
say I had a
Ren.
99.9%
Ren. What a Tumblr name to
chance that
pick.
I was never going to regret this.
The flag is backwards, Abel. Get it together. Hey, it's Elijah Schaefer. I did not expect to see that.
There was definitely a honeymoon phase.
Oh, I've actually seen that person on
hormone therapy.
on Elijah's show. I remember
Everything
that.
felt great. My body felt great. My mind felt clear. I was also becoming an internet influencer pretty quickly. I am 5 months on hormones, about 5.5 months. And since my last update, there have been a lot of changes. So as many of you know...
Whoa, you look like an alien.
I take estrogen shots.
What happened?
But this one is particularly important. Because once I put it into my body, I will be 6 months on estrogen. Sometimes you never think that the things in life that you want are
How did your
going
eyes
to
get farther apart from estrogen?
eventually.
I don't understand. That's one of the side effects they don't tell you about. Your eyes get farther apart.
It turned out to make me more dysphoric. It turned out to make me uncomfortable. The more that happened to my body, the scareder I got, and I came to the realization that I don't feel like I'm actually transgender. A hell of a realization to have.
It's almost like we shouldn't be allowing this to be mainstreamed in the culture.
At around 2.5,
Which
3
is,
months,
which I know
started
is
to
just a
notice
crazy
some concerning side
thought.
effects. I'm not sure if this was from the binding or the testosterone or both, but I started to have heart palpitations that were happening almost daily. I also felt nauseous and sick to my stomach a lot of the time, which wasn't normal for me. I gained about 20 pounds in a relatively short period of time, and it felt like I had edema in my body, which is swelling up of fluid. My face looked very puffy, and so did the rest of my body, and that made me dysphoric as well. Not only was my voice lower, but it was uncomfortable and painful to speak and sing.
Because of the estrogen, I had severe bone loss.
Which it's just crazy that these are completely foreseeable problems that would happen from taking the hormone that you're not supposed to have, you know, as the main hormone in your body. How is this a thing that's happened to our society? I mean, what in the hell? Good Lord, the mental illness. And these evil doctors. I mean, holy shit.
My mental health, depression, mood swings, anger issues, social issues. I lost a lot of friends because I was, in a bad mental state.
Well,
I
you
had
look
cognitive
great.
dissonance with my biology education when I was taking testosterone because, there was a part of me that knew it was probably really bad for me based on what I had learned, but I didn't want to think about that. I just, if something seems too good to be true, it usually is, and that's kind of what it was with medical transition for me.
At least Kat, like I said, Kat got lucky. She's at least kind of cute still and is, doesn't seem like anything majorly wrong happened as opposed to some of these other people.
Way too many detransitioners who said, I was constantly trying to fight against the onslaught of nature. I was always fighting against it with the hormones I was taking. As somebody said, it's like putting diesel in the petrol tank.
Diesel in the petrol tank.
So it's often said that puberty blockers are reversible, but
which
this,
again is also a really dumb thing to
on
say.
Multiple levels.
Really dumb thing.
So the first is that the majority of children who are started on puberty blockers, over 95%, go on to take cross-sex hormones because they are the first step in sequential treatment pathway. Puberty blockers cannot be considered a standalone.
And it's really weird that that's exactly what they do. They know that's what they do. That's what they want to do. But then when you call them out on it, they go, "What? No, that's not."
That estrogen for males carries a very high risk of blood clots, and then a moderate risk of breast cancer, heart disease, stroke, gallstones, and elevated triglycerides, which are a type of cholesterol. And then right from the same document, they list the risks of testosterone for females, very high risk of thickening of the blood, and then a moderate risk of severe liver dysfunction, heart disease, stroke, high blood pressure, and breast or uterine cancer.
Oh, well, then by all means, let's do this to children. I mean, that just sounds great. Who wouldn't want that? And it's just really bizarre that this could have ever been accepted, because anyone who's just using common sense, these are the things you would guess would happen. The very first thing you'd say, well, obviously you're going to be infertile for the rest of your life. That one's obvious, right?
A scandal in and of itself. Something that has not gotten a lot of attention, but I think will in the coming years, is the psychological impact of being told by people in positions of authority, physicians in particular, that these interventions would improve that person's mental health, and then coming to discover that not only did the intervention not improve that person's mental health, but there actually was no evidence to begin with that it ever would.
Trans people, some of them, once they became trans-identified, they really felt like, I can't be comfortable in my body, I can't have a relationship, say, I can't let anyone touch me until I've transitioned. So they became very kind of fixated on medical transition as the thing that would make them feel comfortable in their body.
Yeah,
But
why
in
would they
fact,
ever think that?
didn't
It's not like you've been
happen.
telling
And so
them
it's
that.
almost like the gender dysphoria moves around. At first, it's like focused on the voice, and then they take testosterone and the voice deepens, but then it's like, well, then they have chest dysphoria and they want to get rid of their breasts.
I still hate that they talk as if the voice changes are actually real changes. Because they never end up sounding like men, ever. They sound like women with slightly deeper voices. And it sounds raspy. It gets like a gravelly thing to it. I mean, even in this, where they're trying to say that it's bad, they're still saying, as their voice deepens, and that still implies that it actually works. It does not work.
I broke one of them. The first one was wait 5 years once I transitioned to get breast implants, and that's the one I broke.
Gross.
Double mastectomy
Bummer,
is definitely
dude.
one of the worst
That is a
mistakes
bummer.
that I've made. Like, I have an absurd body because it doesn't
Oh,
look
God.
female, but it also doesn't look male. And now that I view myself as just a woman who
This
has
is
medical
just some
trauma,
real evil
I don't view it as
shit.
like a trans
And I'm not sure how much of this I can
man's
actually show on
I view
YouTube,
it
so
as,
I'm going to have
like,
to wait till they're done showing
surgical
these.
scars and like
I have a
weirdly
feeling
shaped
YouTube will get mad at
nipples
me for this.
and a form of
Oh,
mutilation.
God,
I
that
know
one is
some people
brutal.
don't like that term. I do view it as mutilation. I do view it
Thank
as
me
sort
for
of
turning that off, because,
unnecessary
man, that last one was
medical
brutal.
carnage.
No, we can't watch this. That ain't right.
Okay. So I haven't made a vlog in a really
YouTube
long
would not
time,
like that.
just because
I don't like it.
don't
Holy
know,
crap.
busy things have been happening.
Oh, God, I'm not even going to watch this. I'm just going to listen until it's over. It's like a horror movie.
But I wanted.
I feel like I'm,
I did want to make
12
one, but
and
I was
watching,
told that I had to make one
some John Carpenter
after I
film.
came back from Florida.
Oh, God,
So
they're
down to
actually
Florida,
showing it.
obviously,
I don't want to see this
Dr.
crap.
Ceremony to do my top surgery. Yeah.
Are we done? Is it over?
Mhm. I don't know what to say, really.
Okay, I think it's over. Maybe.
Nursing was
Okay,
so special
it's
for me,
it's
and
over.
so many women report the same thing. I think it's tragic that there are detransitioners out there who won't be able to nurse their children because they got their breasts removed.
A lot of young people are willing
Oh, come
to
on.
completely
The modern
alter their
doctors
bodies
tell you
without
that you
really
can just,
understanding
it's no
the
big deal.
value
You can
of
just get
having your body
implants if
intact.
you
Many of
think it
these
was a
young
mistake.
people have
Because
never
that's
even
the same thing.
experienced a relationship.
It was the hysterectomy that was the worst thing that I had done. Even before I detransitioned, there was a part of me thinking, actually, I do want children now.
When kids
God, a
say this doesn't
hysterectomy.
matter to
Man,
me
that is brutal.
because what really matters to me is my gender identity, and I'll do anything to affirm my gender identity, and I don't care about having kids, and I don't care about sexual function. It seems to me that it's extremely naive of the adults in that person's life to go along with that, because we know that kids change their minds. And
The fact that anyone would ever listen to a kid, a teenager, or even someone in their early 20s about that is just remarkable to me. Why would you listen to that? It makes no sense at all. Just stop it.
Hysterectomy, let's say, as a 20-something-year-old. Let's say you have 2 kids and you're 25 and you say, I want it out, I want it gone. You're going to have a hard time finding a doctor to perform that. And that may seem kind of paternalistic, but there is a reason for it, because there's a high incidence of regret, and There's also a lot of medical consequences to getting a hysterectomy. I mean, for one thing, early dementia if you lose your uterus that early in life.
What? I've never heard that before. That's crazy. I mean, I would assume that you're already somewhat going down that road if you want to get a hysterectomy and you're 19 years old. But wow, I've never heard that before.
The only other time that I can think of that we addressed some psychological problem with a physical intervention was with lobotomies. And, lobotomy was a surgery that was performed that severed the corpus callosum. And it was very popular at the time.
Man, look at that face.
Hailed as a kind of miracle cure. And the person who invented the procedure won a Nobel Prize. But we discovered that these procedures did a lot of damage. And, they fell out of favor pretty shortly after they
I
came
would
on the
propose,
scene.
and stay with me here, I would propose that we bring back lobotomies for the doctors who've been pushing this transgender thing, and we get rid of the transgender thing. Let's just do a flip here. Oh, they're gonna show this? I've seen these before. They better not show this like they showed the top surgeries. Don't worry, I can't show this on YouTube anyway, so you won't have to see it. Hey, it's Billboard Chris.
Just on GoFundMe alone, right now, there are over 40,000 girls raising money for what they call top surgery, which is the euphemism given for radical elective double mastectomy.
Oh, clarify what?
I didn't want
me saying that the doctors should have lobotomies. The doctors who had them should have the lobotomy.
The complete sexual reassignment surgery.
Yeah, we should bring back lobotomies just for the doctors who have done this to children.
So first, I was going to New York to get castrated and to get more work, what we call done, more silicone put in my body. I was on Coney Island with two trannies that had already had the complete
Whoa, bro.
sexual reassignment surgery.
You're not allowed to say that on
We're
YouTube.
laughing and joking and having a good old time. And then they both looked at me and one of them said, "Don't do it." And I said, "Don't do what?" And he said, "All of my life, I thought that if I could just become a woman, I would find peace and joy and happiness." And he said, "And now that I am legally and medically a woman," he said, "I'm more miserable now than I was my entire life." He said, "I think about taking my life every day." And the other one said, "I think about taking my life several times a day, every day."
It is just frustrating though when stuff like this gets brought up, because you're just like, well, I'm pretty sure a lot of people told you this. I mean, some people just won't listen. I get it. I was a punk rock kid. You don't listen to people, but damn. That's don't go that far, man.
There's
I mean,
a
that's
current belief
brutal.
system. There's an oversimplification that all gender dysphoria has one cause, which is, being born in the wrong body, and that there's one treatment, which is transition. And you don't ask questions. This is the only way to go.
Based on the information that I had, that medical transition is by far the best treatment and that you are at risk for suicide if you don't follow that path. I thought I only really had one path that I could take.
That was a nice CGI trans flag there.
I became alarmed back in 2019 after I realized I was seeing more kids with gender dysphoria, and every single one I referred to the gender clinic was being transitioned. And so when an average
Again, how do they
pediatrician
not
sees a kid with
expect
gender
this?
issues,
I mean, this
they're
is
not sure what
this
to
is a
do.
pretty
The whole thing is very
well-known
complicated, and so they want to
thing.
refer to the experts. But I do think most pediatricians don't realize that if they send a kid to the gender clinic, the probability of transition is very high.
It's just
That
really
there's no
bizarre. How can regular people know this And yet these doctors be ignorant of this fact. It's just crazy.
Phrase. It's a deceptive phrase.
I guess it's an appeal to authority.
Warm and innocent. But really what it is a departure from the standards of care for how we treat any other condition. And that is that we take the self-diagnosis at face value. So if someone tells us they have gender dysphoria, we say, okay, you have gender dysphoria. If they tell us, I've always felt that way, we say, okay, you've always felt that way. If they say, I'm a boy trapped in a girl's body, we say, you're a boy trapped in a girl's body. So we're just mirroring and reflecting without any questioning, probing, curiosity, without taking a systemic view, and without using really any of our clinical discernment.
What was it that wasn't it Jordan Peterson who talked about that? Or it's like, affirmation is not healthcare. It's not psychiatric care at all. That's not the job of a psychiatrist to affirm you. That's not what you're there for. At least traditionally.
And then we weave what's called a golden thread from the assessment to the treatment plan, and we make sure that the treatment plan that we're proposing is a match.
And so with gender dysphoria, though, it's like all of that goes out the window. And we assume there's one pathway for treatment. And it just so happens that that one pathway, medicalized transition, involves some really invasive, irreversible interventions.
These doctors and therapists put me through this. They had no reason to, except for the fact that I said it.
The American Academy of Pediatrics issued a new policy statement stating that the affirmative model was the right way, that whatever a child says about him or her or their self, we all affirm and go with, and we don't question. And that review was fact-checked by a sex researcher and psychologist named James Cantor, who was intimately familiar with the research. It had been part of his
he looks like a
graduate studies
psychologist,
years
doesn't
before. And he fact-checked it and found that some of the assertions made in this policy statement were factually untrue.
I am shocked. Shocked. Well, not that shocked.
Most children who develop gender dysphoria will have resolution of that gender dysphoria by the time they reach adulthood. No one really understands the process or the timing of that resolution, but the studies that we do have show that depending
It's a
upon
bummer that all
studies,
those
somewhere
diplomas and
between
stuff
roughly
behind them just don't really seem to
65
mean anything anymore. There was a
98%
time when if you saw that, you'd be like, damn, I
have
probably
gender
listen to this guy.
dysphoria as
Now you got to
kids
say,
will
I'm not sure.
have,
Is this guy nuts or is he not nuts?
significant gender dysphoria as adults. But this fact seems to be forgotten by medicine currently.
There are certain assumptions in this gender identity affirming model that really need to be examined. And one of them is that teenagers are never wrong about anything. And the assumption that what a teenager wants right now is going to be best for their long-term health and well-being. And if you're building a whole medical
Yeah, in no other instance do we
around those
ever
assumptions,
we never listen to teenagers about anything, and we shouldn't. But apparently we do when it comes to this.
There are two very different narratives about gender. One is the narrative of pathology. So the narrative of pathology says gender dysphoria is a psychiatric illness so severe that it warrants extreme.
Yeah, Elliot, they definitely have made that a lot harder to do
surgeries
nowadays
and
to cast stuff.
that are as invasive and extreme.
You still can do it, but man, they make it a pain in the ass.
On the other hand, the same people advocating for those medical treatments also will tell you that there's nothing pathological about this condition that we might call gender dysphoria. In fact, maybe we shouldn't call it gender dysphoria at all. Maybe we should just call it gender incongruence. If you look at the criteria for how gender dysphoria is described in the DSM-5, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, it's really just a list of stereotypes and then someone saying that they feel like they don't fit these stereotypes or that they're uncomfortable in the body that they have. So what's wrong with that is that you're recommending
Elliot,
some
you're going
invasive,
crazy, man.
risky,
Calm down.
Experimental and costly medical treatments
YouTube
for
won't let it
something
go
that
through,
you're
but it
saying
ends
is
up
not a
on the
medical
screen. Look what
condition.
you've done. Are you ashamed now?
And so it's the medical model jumping
Oh.
in on what you could call a
You
cultural
bastard.
zeitgeist of people pushing back against gender norms. And put the two together, and we've got an awful lot of children who want to medically transition. It's not right to medicalize perfectly healthy bodies and make them sicker.
People don't realize now is that any of these words, particularly if a kid says that they're non-binary or trans or any of these other identities, these kids are looking to have like a tattoo of some sort to prove to others, which means they want to be medicalized somehow so they can say, I'm on E, I'm on T.
And if we as professionals are not able to hold space for this being an exploratory thing that teenagers do, and professionals are actually kind of rubber stamping the identity and encouraging kids to medically transition, this is really the potential of a serious epidemic of medical interventions that are probably going to be inappropriate for many of these kids.
I'm pretty sure that 100% accurately describes what's happening right now. I don't think we have a potential of that. We're already living in that world. 100%.
It seems like all of this is based on the fear that if you don't affirm a child's identity right away, they're going to be at a high risk of suicide.
We're living in an age where there's the whole do you want a dead daughter or a live son thing going on, right? And parents are being intimidated and coerced into if you don't affirm right away, your kid's going to commit suicide. Well, that's a really dangerous thing to tell people.
There's a real dereliction of duty and irresponsible behaviors that people have been misrepresenting the data on suicide.
All of the clinicians that are actually tracking current rates of self-harm and suicide will tell you, luckily, the suicide rate is quite low. And it's not a legitimate outcome. And that we don't know medicalizing reduces suicide.
You know, doctors have really been transmitting this information in a forceful, authoritative way. Puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones will
Dude, what kind of
provide relief
laptop or webcam is this
depression
guy
and anxiety
filming his
and,
interview on? It looks
suicidal
like
thoughts
it's
and reduce the future risk of suicide, etc. But the reality
it's like we're in
is that
2005
these
or something.
interventions have not been shown to do those things.
In the United States, there are 22 professional organizations that have lined up behind gender affirmation. And these professional organizations are putting a thumb on the scale, not only by silencing their own members, but by stifling debate in the medical journals. For example, in 2020, the official journal of the American Academy of Pediatrics, called Pediatrics, published a study by Jack Turbin, a young psychiatrist, and he basically data mined a massive online survey.
And guys, don't forget,
try to show that
if you're having a good
puberty
time,
blockers
hit the like
prevent
button.
suicides. This is
Super chats are
convenient sample data,
appreciated.
and it
Activate the
cannot
super
prove
chat
any sort of cause
jukebox.
and
You know,
effect.
you
But
know,
he made that
you know
claim,
the thing.
and it was written up in all the major media. And we found out later that Dr. Turbin had received a substantial grant from a drug company that makes puberty blockers. He hadn't disclosed that. When researchers wrote to Pediatrics about all the errors in the study, each of them was told there was no space to publish their rebuttals. you know, an ordinary pediatrician, if he reads any journals at all.
Oh yeah, and of course, if
It's
you're
gonna be
not enjoying it,
pediatrics, right? 'Cause
then you
you
should
get
super
it.
chat to take a break from it.
Shows up. Like, it's delivered to your
That's
house.
the only way this train's stopping
Like, and it's supposed to be
for at least
really
a few
high-quality
seconds.
journal, but it is not covering itself in glory on this topic.
The evidence that's most often cited comes from these surveys where they just ask kids about suicidality, and there's lots of problems with that evidence, because of course kids think if you're trans you have to be suicidal. Girls taking testosterone are less likely to express suicidality, which makes sense because actually testosterone is an antidepressant. We know we can use it in men as an antidepressant, but boys taking estrogen are more suicidal. And of course, if the kids believe that this is life-saving medical treatment, you're getting a massive placebo response.
Did that guy just say testosterone's an antidepressant and estrogen
I've actually done
is the
research
opposite?
on
Is
the
that what we're
world's
seeing?
largest youth gender clinic in London, known as the Tavistock, to investigate the actual number of deaths by suicide. Out of 15,000 patients over 10 years, they've had 4 suicides. Now, those are 4 terrible tragedies, of course. But as you can see, suicide, thankfully, is very, very rare. Now, the suicide rate for these patients is higher than the overall population, perhaps 5 or 6 times higher. But we can't conclude that this elevated risk is directly related to transgender identity, because many of these kids have other psychological conditions that we know increase the risk of suicide, like depression, eating disorders, and autism. The crucial question, of course, is whether puberty
You're
blockers
telling me
or cross-sex
autism
hormones
causes
reduce or
transgenderism?
increase the actual risk of suicide.
Man,
And the
if-
honest answer
if
is
that
we
was
don't-
true,
we just don't know because we lack.
Then why am I not transgender?
For what it's worth, of the
I
4
have been
suicides at the
informed
Tavistock,
by
2
the
came from
authorities
patients
of
on
the
waiting
internet
list,
that
and
I
2
am
from
in fact
patients undergoing
autistic.
treatment. So there's no evidence that taking cross-sex hormones reduces the risk of suicide.
It's just not true that these kids are more likely to complete a suicide if they're not given these interventions. And in fact, there was a study looking at the Swedish population of those who had transitioned that found that
those
who
crazy
had
Swedes.
transitioned had suicide rates 19 times higher than population-matched controls. Now, that's not saying that transition causes suicidality, and there's lots of different ways to understand that. And I don't know that we can draw hard and fast conclusions from that number, but I think it
Oh man, you
certainly
can't
tells
tell me
us
that
transition doesn't.
YouTube's throttling the super chats now. That can't happen, man. We'll see if the alert pops up.
To me, the scariest part of it is the idea that you could cut a parent out of a child's life because the parent is hesitant to socially or medically transition.
What therapists are doing in the affirmative model is to take all threat of suicide at face value and treat all threats of suicide as equally valid without assessing all the things we normally assess when it comes to suicidality, like plan, means, and intent, right?
That is true. There is
will
a
be center
PayPal link in the
Parents who are desperate and don't know what else to do and are afraid.
in the description. I guess I could say that too. Super chats and PayPal.
Their complete mental health
PayPal counts for super chat jukebox.
keep the kids until the parents agree to affirm. And I've seen cases of this happening where I know that if it were about any other issue, people at the hospital would have been able to assess, you know, this is passive suicidal ideation. It's not active. They don't have a plan. They don't have a means. They don't have an intent. It's just a distressing thought. It's our responsibility to believe in our patients' capacity for resilience, even and especially when they don't believe in it themselves. We should never tell anyone under any circumstances that if you don't get what you want or if you don't get what you think is the solution to your problems, you will kill yourself. That's really damaging. I would call that malpractice.
That is a hell of a painting. Is that AI generated art that they're using back there?
I
It kind of
knew
looks
there was
like it.
something more than just depression and anxiety and autism. I felt like there was something else. And initially I thought that something else was filled by gender dysphoria.
I think that being sexually assaulted absolutely contributed to my gender dysphoria getting stronger and wanting to be a woman even less.
I was diagnosed with ADHD, autism spectrum disorder, traits of borderline personality disorder, traits of post-traumatic stress from childhood bullying.
I had suffered from an eating disorder. I had had a suicide attempt.
Around the time I was 11 or 12, I developed anorexia nervosa. And then years later, it led me to develop body dysmorphia, which I falsely, wrongly attributed to being gender dysphoria.
So it was easy for me to be like, I'm mentally ill and depressed and weird and androgynous. Actually, I'm mentally ill, weird, depressed, androgynous, and trans, and I need to be a gay man, and that's how I'll be loved and accepted by everybody that I love and want to love me, and that's how that
These are
started.
really the problems that the therapist should actually be
Once
fixing.
a kid identifies as trans,
Who would have thought
or
that there was all these
describes
other
gender
issues going
dysphoria,
on? Who
all
could
of
have
the other
known?
conditions that they were struggling
Who could have
with
foreseen this?
before
It's just
become
wow, out of left
attributed
field.
to the distress of being trans.
Sometimes it's even seen if you facilitate transition, these other issues will resolve themselves. As we
Which doesn't
know,
make
as we've
any
seen
sense
it,
at all.
That doesn't happen. A study in the Tavistock, which is the largest gender clinic for children in the world, and they showed 48% of those children presenting seeking to medicalize their identity were autistic. And I remember talking to one teenager, and we were discussing how testosterone is very hard on the female body. And she said, yeah, I'm very well aware of that, and it's really bad on the female body, but it's okay for me, because you see, I'm really male. And she didn't realize, no, we have physical limitations with our body, and you have been frankly lied to believe that what's in your mind is actually impacting the chromosomes in your body and the cells in your body. They're not.
I've spoken with probably 100 parents of children with autism. They all tell me the same things, that their children tend to think more black and white, and they tend to fixate on this issue of gender when they've been introduced to it in school or online. And so once this ideology's already gotten in their head, it can be a lot harder to reach them.
There can be a lot of anxiety in people with autism because they have the same feelings as the rest of us. They're just not able to interpret what all's happening to trigger those feelings. They already know there's something different about them. They've probably been bullied for being different, and that's very painful.
It's what the what we were people were taught growing up. Oh, it's accept everybody, accept everything. Be yourself, and it just ends up like this.
Ideology that says, here's why you feel different.
Sometimes you need to tell a child no and explain to them that, listen, this is what's really going on. We're going to work through this. You can't just live in fantasy land.
These teenagers are very, very influenced by the most alluring concept that I've ever heard, which is if you take these drugs, you can be somebody different with a different name, and nobody will be able to mention or even refer to that old, awkward, lost kid. Nobody will be able to refer to them. You can be this new, remarkably like that person on YouTube, new, sunny, social kind of butterfly person. And that is at the end of the rainbow if you just medically transition.
I mean, it's because of the internet and the way that we raise kids now and everything. Because, I mean, come on. Everything they're describing is pretty standard run-of-the-mill stuff. For teenagers. I mean, for being a teenager. Doesn't everyone remember being a teenager and feeling all over the place and depressed and then manic and feeling like you're lost in the world? I mean, come on.
And they'll begin to research it, or perhaps they have a friend who's recently identified as trans, and that friend may explain it to them. And so it's interesting. It's
Man, Elliot, they're not a fan of you. They don't.
It seems to be very.
They don't want you to be able to do that.
Kids who have been doing a lot of research.
You've gotten on the naughty list of the big tech beast.
Other YouTube videos by other teenagers or young people.
They go onto the internet and they say something like, I hate my body. I don't want to be me. I want to be something else. And with those questions, they end up with, you could be trans. You could transition.
All right, well, maybe it's not you. Maybe it's me. Maybe I'm the one who's angered the YouTube overlords. Could be. It could be.
The idea that being trans is a mental illness doesn't make any
Oh my
sense to
God,
me.
look at that person. How could you possibly take that person seriously? That's another thing we just need to bring back is, I say this all the time, judging a book by its cover, okay? We're supposedly not supposed to do that. A lot of this could be fixed if you just looked at a person and said, yeah, no, you are a crazy person. I am not going to affirm this behavior. You are crazy. Discord servers. By the way, join the Swamp Discord server. We'll help make sure you don't become trans. The anti-trans pill. Only on the Swamp Discord server. I don't know what this god-awful music is, but I'm sure it's probably going to give me a copyright claim. So I'm just going to turn this down and put on my music until it comes back. My music's less annoying anyway. At least in my opinion. God, what is this, the mental illness reel they've got going here? It seems kind of cruel. It's like watching one of my videos. It's TikTok Tuesday. Well, that was sure something.
Therapists might be naive to what's going on in these friend groups and to some of the messages that these kids are seeing from their friends and online.
When we think about the suggestibility of a young person, we can't rule out that perhaps they've adopted and absorbed some of these ideas from
Who would have
the kind of
imagine this? This is revolutionary, groundbreaking ideas.
The things that lead kids to identify as trans are very, very specific for each case, but in terms of how they came to that decision and how they began to feel that way, at least in the new cohort that we're looking at, it really seems to be socially mediated.
And these ideas are highly contagious because they appeal to so many of the things that we long for. They provide the kind of illusory hope that there's a way out of normal human struggles like the discomfort of puberty.
See, that's what I'm saying. That's what I said earlier. It's like this is typical teenage stuff. Very, very normal. You used to just have to, push through it.
There's this carrot dangling that when I achieve the next level.
And then you add the internet. You add this whole, I guess you just call it like the participation trophy, culture of like everyone's a winner. You're great. Whatever you say is good. Be yourself. And everyone has to accept it.
When I
this is how you get this problem.
When I go through this or that medical transition, when I get my binder, when I pass, when I, and that is part of what makes it so contagious too, is that you don't have to find out right away that this belief system isn't leading anywhere good, because there's always something to hope for.
I said what I said, and boy, I heard what you said. My God, how could I not?
I think that it's very difficult to reconcile this as an identity human rights issue and an issue that needs really drastic medical intervention. Those things don't make so much sense when you try to hold them together.
it's the one belief about yourself that you can never question. It's almost gender has become a sacred category.
I think they have been overtaken with a kind of religious fervor.
I know it's
that has
never,
blinded
they
them
say it's never helpful, to do like the
reality.
I told you so.
I really think that
But it
a
is
lot of
frustrating to see these people who've gotten out of this. They've woken up and they've realized what was happening.
trans rights movement
They're like, it's almost like this. It's almost like that. It's like, yeah, no shit. We've been telling you that. The world has literally been screaming this at you.
Movement and how suddenly the T kind of jumped in.
It's not funny, but it is kind of
that was
funny
about
at the same
sexual
time.
orientation.
More than anything, it's
We
just
realized in
depressing.
the 1970s there was a great
If you don't laugh, you cry, right?
And so that people who are gay and lesbian and bisexual, they're saying we're born this way. And it was a really strong campaign. And since then,
It was
we've made
also
huge
stupid.
inroads, and I'm delighted we have, into a massive acceptance of people being gay and lesbian and bisexual. And from that, I can only say with an incredible level of strategic
Oh yeah,
thinking,
it's all been this has all been great for
LGBT movement
society.
started talking
Every bit
about,
of it.
born in the wrong
Nothing
body. So they
wouldn't
moved
change a
from
thing.
born this way in the 1970s to born in the wrong body in the noughties.
From what we can tell at this point is that they were experimenting, and predominantly that I can tell along the West Coast, San Francisco, Los Angeles, the whole West Coast, Portland, Oregon, Seattle, Washington. Lesbian communities
Now,
were
how did
all
this
in it,
interview
were
get
all
such a great
reporting
camera and the
these
audio
changes
is
that
just
our
trash?
communities were disappearing.
It's the best
So they
camera
were
by far.
literally transing the gay away.
Transing the gay away.
So we know, for example, that Jazz Jennings has never had an orgasm. So that is an extraordinary thing for
What
someone
an
who's born
odd
male
thing
be
to know
20
about somebody.
and never have had an orgasm.
What a very odd thing to
And
know
it
about
looks
somebody.
as though
And we
that
talked about
won't
this
ever be
on
possible
the
for Jazz.
Friday stream, the Jazz Jennings
Kids who
thing.
get
Man, it's
gender
depressing.
dysphoria will eventually desist, and this is what the evidence tells us, and that most of those who desist will then be lesbian or gay. What we may be doing actually is sterilizing and destroying the sexual function of kids who may have grown up to be gay or lesbian.
You can't even have a boy now pick up a doll.
Man, on the
right
Friday
away,
stream, we went over the
some
freaking
other
Jazz
adult saying,
Jennings
"Oh,
thing
look,
now,
his
and
kid is
man,
trans.
that's brutal.
I'm a child.
If you missed
of
it, there's gonna be a video about it this week.
This
So
stuff that people are doing now to their kids, that like the stuff with Jazz Jennings, I can't believe how absolutely regressive this is. That's what's so insane.
that's what I
about
said
this. They've
earlier.
managed
That's what I said
to
earlier.
actually brainwash people.
Oh,
thinking
boy
that
wears a dress.
affirmation
Must be a
is
chick.
a progressive thing.
Oh, the good old days. Look at that, the good old days. Well, that's not the good old days. What is that? I want to be him. I want to be her.
People want to be good people. The expectation is that if you're a good person, then you believe what someone tells you if they are a minority or a victim.
Whenever they're talking about, you're trying to take away trans rights, it's like they're there. The protections are there. Now, of course, it doesn't mean that the oppression of otherness doesn't still happen. That's why this whole thing with the LGBT was so attractive to this wider audience of basically white kids that, had
Oh,
other
could it be?
luxuries, privilege.
Could it be what
and
I say all the time?
And this
The
sense
college-educated
of,
white
What's
women?
going to make me special?
The liberal college-educated white women? They're a blight on this country.
The fact that things are so polarized politically is really unfortunate, because for those of us speaking out who have always historically been very, very progressive, open-minded people, are demonized as though we're closed-minded, and that's why we are speaking out about this.
MSNBC, CNN, they're not going to talk about all the parents that have been protesting at the clinics. I had over 13 protests last year nationwide in front of pediatric gender clinics. I contacted the press all the time. Nobody came out.
Who would believe those of us speaking out, right? These kind of fringe lefties.
It is so annoying though that we can't actually get to the root of these problems because we still have to be progressive. We still have to be the open-minded and all that crap. We're not ever going to get to the root of this issue if we still have to say, well, I agree with all the other stuff. It's just the transing the kids part that I disagree with. As if we just woke up here one day and this wasn't a long process.
You can't say anything.
But no, sure.
That
Stay
environment was created
progressive.
by the left to silence dissent from within the left. And it's been very effective. That same week, you have people who are writing the standards of care sitting on a panel saying it's okay to call CPS on parents who are not affirming. Our side is not doing anything to de-escalate either. So I want liberals to help us de-escalate this from culture war to conversation. And in order to do that, we need to admit that some children are getting hurt, even if some are getting helped. And we need to look honestly at what is going on in countries with better healthcare systems.
Ah, yes. Let's go to the part where are we going to hear about how much better the healthcare system is?
On the big news stories overnight, the
The typical thing.
closed the UK's only dedicated gender identity clinic for children and young people.
NHS England has announced the closure of its controversial gender identity clinic for children after an independent report found it was not fit for purpose.
They too saw a 4,000% increase in teen girls seeking care. And
okay, if they're just going to talk about how they've gotten rid of gender clinics, I'm down with that. I thought we were about to hear the typical.
We don't have the final report. We have the
their
interim
healthcare
report.
systems are better than ours.
It diagnosed the system with a problem.
It's free and all that crap.
Including things like diagnostic overshadowing, which means that once a kid is identified as having gender issues, all of his or her other issues are ignored.
The kids that Tavistock sees have many other problems. They have very high rates of autistic spectrum disorders, self-harm, depression, anxiety, all of these sorts of things. And those things aren't dealt with because there's this weird way that as soon as somebody says gender, they don't do anything else.
So when you have a population with multiple mental health comorbidities and only the gender dysphoria is being treated with the assumption that the other issues will go away, what you have is kids getting very, very poor treatment.
And the second problem is that the Tavistock has this hugely ideological approach. It hasn't been doing good medicine. It hasn't been keeping records. It hasn't been doing proper research. It hasn't been investigating the reasons behind a child's trans identity. They've just been assuming that a child who says, I'm trans, is trans, and putting them on these very poorly researched pathways with puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones.
Multiple European countries have conducted systematic evidence reviews, found that the evidence could not confirm that this was medically necessary or life-saving treatment, and have issued very strict guidelines so that children are very carefully evaluated before medically transitioning. And some of these countries have urged against social transition, since it appears from preliminary research that social transition generally leads to medical transition.
Well, it is the point of it. I mean, that's why they do it, right? That is the entire point of the social transition. But this is ridiculous. I mean, if we're still talking about, and this is supposed to be about, the detransitioners and about how this is bad, but man, if we're still talking about how only under very specific circumstances with the proper vetting and all this crap, no, are you crazy? No, there is no way. There's not a single reason ever to do this, especially to a child. I mean, you could make arguments when someone gets older, and sure, go ahead. But come on.
or at least in Sweden,
Man.
Finland, and England.
There's no way. You can't just say that, well, if we...
Review of the evidence.
Well, we really checked. You know, we really talked to the kid a lot. And it seems like this 10-year-old should be socially transitioned and then medically castrated. That seems like the way to go.
The American Academy of Pediatrics
Get out of here.
refusing
Get
to
out of
listen to
town.
this review. So is the World Professional Association of Transgender Health. They also wrote in their recently released guidelines that they could not conduct a systematic evidence review because the
Guys, I
research
was
is so
born this
scant.
way.
That is not true. Other countries did them.
You need
The
to
state
you
of
need to
Florida
respect
did
my
them.
identity,
They all
okay?
came to the same conclusion.
I can't help it.
The American Academy of Pediatrics
I was born this way.
Education is being held this year in Anaheim, California. With over 10,000 doctors attending, a group took the opportunity to come as well.
So the way the American Academy of Pediatrics is supposed to
Respect my identity.
represent the 66,000 pediatricians that are
They need
the
to-
members is via
Maybe they've already
this
done it,
thing
but
called
South Park
an
needs to
annual
do a
leadership forum.
revision of Cartman's
Members can
Respect My
submit
Authority.
resolutions,
It's got to
and
be
then the
Respect
membership
My
can read
Identity.
them and vote on them online.
Respect my
but the binding
identity.
vote is made at the leadership forum, which is just people who are chapter presidents and heads of committees and things like that. I submitted a resolution in 2020 and it was largely ignored. But then another pediatrician submitted a resolution in 2021 calling for a systematic review of the evidence behind pediatric gender transition. And that, because of the pandemic, they had it online and it got a lot of engagement. It was in the top 5 in terms of
This woman's kind of got a lazy eye.
pediatrician engagement, and it was
I'm
4 to
thinking
1
she may have gotten all the
versus
COVID
negative
boosters
votes.
and shots.
And then in 2022, they were so
But I'm not a
concerned
doctor.
that that sort of thing might happen again that
That's a joke,
March, they
guys.
passed a new
YouTube, that's a
rule
joke.
saying that unsponsored resolutions could not be seen by the rank and file pediatricians. So I did submit another resolution in 2022. There were 4 other pediatricians who co-authored it with me, but it got buried. Nobody could give it a yes or no vote, and very few could even read it. So it's important to realize that when we hear 22 professional organizations support affirmation, this is not the voice of the average pediatrician. It's the position of a few activists that have captured key committees at these medical societies and are using the bureaucracy to ensure the voice of regular pediatricians.
Well, this woman seems to get it.
While other countries are walking back the affirmative approach to treating gender dysphoria, the United States is digging in its heels. And why that is something of a mystery, but all we can do
No,
is
it's not.
speculate that
It's
there's
not a
tremendous
mystery.
profit in it, and there isn't in these other countries, and B, people have invested so much psychologically in this narrative that they have to do everything they can to protect it, even if it involves harming children and families.
At least that is closer to the truth. Saying we don't know it's a bit of a mystery. It's totally not a mystery. This is what happens when you become the most successful and affluent country on the planet and in the history of the world. People who don't have problems, they make shit up. These are people who, if the power went out for a week, they'd be dead. This is not a good way for human beings to live. It's not.
Bears some resemblance to what happened with the opioid epidemic.
There was a lot of people in the founding of the country over years and years and years and years who talked about the more that people got removed from the land and from their food source, the worse it was going to get, and that people were going to get crazy.
That simply was not true. There was no evidence.
That's been known for a very long
There
time.
were no safeguards in place around the prescribing of opioids, and we're all now painfully aware of the consequence of that.
but I was hanging outside of bars with friends of mine. My friends, very butch, you know, we hung out, we smoked outside and everything. We got approached. There was this metrosexual guy that
Smoked
came around.
outside.
I don't know if he was a big
You
pharma rep.
must be trans.
assume that
If you're a
that's
woman and you
probably what was
smoked
going on.
outside,
And he had a whole bunch of these.
you must
things
be
that looked
trans.
like this. He was handing out for free and telling all of these young lesbians, I got something you want. I got something you need. I'm like, what is that? And he said testosterone, and he yelled back like that.
What a bizarre thing.
I didn't put it all together.
Man,
Again,
in
this
my
is at a
day,
time in the 90s.
it was about coke or, you know,
It wasn't until Jennifer
good
Biller's
drugs,
article came out
not
in February
testosterone.
2018 in the Federalist, which was a publication I never would have looked at otherwise. But there it was. Who were the wealthy white
Oh, by
men
the way,
behind
one of my
transgenderism?
videos was in the Federalist. No joke. There was an article where they linked to my video and used a screenshot from my video. Real thing that happened.
I don't think
Pretty cool,
drugs
man.
and
Pretty cool.
puberty blockers and surgeries have anything to do with a sense of one's identity. I think that's all propaganda. It's corporate propaganda to go along with this corporate illusion. They're selling a product and they do a really, really good job. And young people, they're buying it. They're just buying it.
Oh, God, you look gross. Absolutely gross. Gender affirming from your phone? Get your prescription the same day. Wow. And now here we are back to the weird anime thing. They've shown this quite a few times.
What people don't realize now is that if they get those puberty blockers and they're pushing for it to be younger and younger, because the younger the child is that's put on puberty blockers first, then they go to wrong sex hormones, their secondary sex characteristics can be a little bit more tricky. And the medical industry loves that because they got to keep that going. Because again, as Jennifer Billick talks about all these markets opening up, we got to keep those drugs coming for a lifetime in order to keep that body, because it will fight forever. The natural DNA in our bodies will fight forever against those poisons that are literally being put in that body.
It's also part of the profiteering package because you're sterilizing a whole
Man, who would have thought she would have been
segment
one of the most sane
the
people in
next
this? Wow.
generation who will, if they decide that they want to have children later, will need the techno-medical complex on the reproductive technology side.
The techno-medical complex? How have I not heard of this one
From,
before?
like, 2014
This sounds like it's
until
right up my
now.
alley.
It's everywhere. It's in our governments, not just one government, but all Western societies.
Now we're getting into Alex
They're
Jones
changing their
territory.
laws,
I
they're
love it.
changing their language. They're changing their institutions.
100%.
If you go fill out a form at your doctor's office, suddenly there's more than male or female. People are being
Androgynous cannot be a gender identity. How can they have an androgynous as a gender identity? Get out of
And the past 2
here.
years has really accentuated that process by everybody being on technology and isolated in their own little bubbles. I mean, for people to think that this is just an organic development is startling to me. It's absolutely startling that people haven't even grasped this much, that this is really off.
I think I've grasped it. I'm there. Oh man, this is where it's going to be brutal. This is the
What's up, my beautiful
last
people?
part.
How
where
are we
got
doing today? If you've been around my channel for a
about
minute, then you know
25 minutes
male
left.
to female
Man,
to male.
this is going to be brutal. The detransition
So I went
part.
through transition, and then after about 9 months, I came to the realization that I'm not transgendered.
I was living with a friend of mine who also identified as transgender at that time. But in 2020, he decided to detransition. So before that, he was trying to show me the detrans subreddit and all of these people's stories. And I wouldn't look at it because I thought that they were all bigots that just wanted to take away trans healthcare. But as soon as I decided,
They keep getting rid of all
this was a mistake,
those
then I was just
detrans
suddenly open
groups,
to reading all those things, and I started
online.
just reading
Because they always get bigger than the trans groups because there's more and more people all the time, and they keep getting rid of them. What does that tell you? I don't know.
Over the next few years, I did think a lot about, I was, again, reframing my life in the context of me being autistic and having ADHD. And suddenly me being bullied as a child made a lot more sense. Me not wanting to fit gender roles made a lot more sense. Not understanding that this is what girls are supposed to do and, not being able to fit in. Those all kind of made sense. Those are things that were because I was autistic. They weren't because I was transgender. And so I was spending all that time chasing something that ultimately I was never going to be able to achieve anyway.
Oh, that is brutal. What Michelle looks like this now. Man, this wreaks havoc on your body. That is genuinely hard to look
denying
at.
your own material
I mean,
reality,
holy hell.
Or trying to convince other people that they need to
You have my sympathy.
material reality in order for you to be comfortable in society.
Just naturally, I found my way to radical feminist materials online.
As one does, of
And I
course.
saw the links between trauma and trans identification. And I started talking to detransitioners, just a very small group. And I realized that, yeah, it was all due to trauma and nothing had changed. And I wasn't really any different and I wasn't any better off. The worst part is that I've sort of learned that I could have just dealt with it.
Everyone that knew me, they would have argued with anybody that Paige was content and secure and happy and just being the person she was meant to be. And none of them had a clue that I was depressed, that I was bitter, that I hated myself, that I attempted to take my life quite a few times. Even the young queens that looked up to me, that would come and stay at my apartment, they didn't know that.
Well,
And
that's
then come to
creepy.
now,
We should probably
when I think
revisit
back,
that
and I'm
with
like, wow, how many of them felt the same
with the
way?
authorities.
I recognize that I didn't just live a lie. I became the lie. I was the lie.
Some people detransition because they faced persecution as being trans. But in recent studies, most detransitioners, I believe the number is 60%, detransitioned because they found that they were able to align with their birth sex.
Why do they detransition? Most commonly, they say exhaustion. They're tired out. They're sick of trying to be somebody that they don't feel they actually are.
This was a study of 100 individuals who detransitioned. For this study, I reached out to communities with varied perspectives. So on the one hand, I shared information on the listservs of WPATH and APA, which are organizations that tend to be pro-medical transition. And I also shared information on detransition forums and detransition private groups or social media. And in those communities, the belief that transition is universally beneficial may be less common. The most frequently endorsed reason for detransitioning in my study was that their personal definition of male or female changed, so they became comfortable identifying as their natal sex. Another reason that individuals detransitioned was that they were concerned about medical complications, or they found that their mental health either did not improve or worsened with transition. Some detransitioners were dissatisfied with the physical effects of transition, either that the changes in their body was either too much or too little. Some individuals detransitioned because they discovered that their gender dysphoria was caused by trauma or a mental health condition. And some individuals detransitioned because they felt discriminated against while they were transitioned. Another reason that came up, this was really interesting because I did not have any questions about it. Individuals reported that having difficulty accepting themselves as lesbian, gay, or bisexual was associated with their gender dysphoria and desire to transition.
It's weird how there's
Finally
such
accepting themselves
common things that you would guess about this, that they act like, this was very unusual. I did not even see this coming. Really, you didn't? Okay, well that's odd.
Less than a quarter
You're the professional here.
informed the clinicians that facilitated their transitions that they had detransitioned. So it's likely that individuals who are facilitating transitions are missing most of this population. One of the surprising things that
Shadow
I found
people.
in
Here's where we get into the
transitioners,
conspiracy theories. And then the shadow people came out of the darkness and they came in and they started transing your kids.
Just sharing their
I'm
own
ready. I'm here for it.
experiences.
I'd been told by trans activists that detransitioners were extremely rare and that a lot of them were transphobic and that I shouldn't listen to them.
It's lonely enough being a detransitioner and not having the support of a group of friends that you could go out and have fun with, right? Like when you were in that movement.
With friends like these, I mean, geez.
In July of 2020, I started realizing that hormone therapy was no longer having a satisfactory effect on my mental health and my physical health. But now at this point in time, I
mean, when I was younger, we did what normal people did. We went to punk shows, got drunk, did drugs, and beat the shit out of each other. Now that's a healthy way to live.
Which led me to spiral into a state of depression and being admitted to a psychiatric hospital.
So Jung coined the term shadow to refer to any part of us that we actually don't want to know about. And one of the things that I've thought about is that detransitioners carry the shadow for people. They are absolutely a shadow group. People don't want to know that they exist. People demonize them. They feel isolated. When they detransition, they often lose friends. They often have to hide, maybe even, that they're detrans, because they hold
Again,
this thing
just
that we
like
don't know about.
being trans, you can't hide. You can't hide being detrans either. I mean, come on, like we don't, like no one's noticing that something is amiss here. Something has gone awry.
When I referred to those years as being the lost years, is because I feel like I have very little memory of what happened or why I was thinking the way that I did.
Well, that happened to me too, but like I said, it was
All
the
those years that
the
I
booze
wasted, really.
and the drugs.
Like I said, I have to now live with what I've done.
I turned to professionals, doctors, and I was not helped. I was just ushered along, you know, very mindless.
I feel like they're showing a lot of MySpace
and
pictures.
I had permanent damage because of it.
That's what I hear. I have ruined my life. I've ruined my body. I've ruined my health. I had a perfectly good body, and now it's ruined. And I've heard that, you know, repeatedly from detransitioners, and it's a horrible feeling.
These vulnerable people were treated incredibly badly by the professionals.
That one's actually a good painting. That's the first one that's halfway decent.
Because people told
Oh,
them
that one's
that they
halfway
could have
decent
an
too.
easier
Who
life
did these?
if
Those
they
other paintings
transitioned,
were
and it turned out to
not
be a
great.
much more difficult life. People who've fallen in with the principle of first do no harm have actually harmed young, vulnerable people to an incomprehensible degree.
Yeah, see, like this looks like an AI generated painting.
Clinicians,
Right
you know,
here.
we've been sold a bill of lies, and I honestly feel for all my colleagues who are still doing the affirmation thing, who really think that they're doing the right thing. They really think they're on the right side of history. I understand that. That's going to come crashing down at some point, and it's going to be really hard to reckon with what they've done. Same with the teachers, doctors, and parents.
We're rushing to make a permanent medical transformation. I can't think of anything that I've seen in my time as a therapist that is more
The audio and video in this is just all over the place. I understand that, you know, in independent production, I get it, but why did she have a lapel mic, a lavalier mic on when they're clearly just using the audio from the camera?
And the detransitioners that I've worked
being
with
a
are
stickler.
some of the wisest young people I've ever
It
met.
really doesn't matter. I'm just curious.
I think we need to let kids have that identity exploration and then allow them to develop a prefrontal cortex so then they can have long-term planning and decision-making and sort of, you know, just grow up, just evolve.
I don't think it's something that children should choose at all because, you know, as a 22-year-old, I didn't have all of the pieces of my life together at that time. I couldn't predict who I wanted to be 10 years in the future. At 22, can you imagine a child at the age of 10 deciding that, you know, who they want to be for the rest of their life?
It's just
It is
okay
really
to be
bizarre
different,
that people
and
have to learn
sometimes
this.
It's just not
that this
always
wasn't
black and white
apparent.
as to why you feel.
That this wasn't just an obvious thing. That's everyone's on their own journey, I guess, you guys.
I don't believe that anyone is born in the wrong body. I think that the goal of treatment for gender dysphoria should be self-acceptance. And in addition to that, I would like to see society move towards being more accepting of LGBT and gender non-conforming people. Because I feel like what pushes people to medically transition a lot of times is trauma that they've faced from society not accepting them for who they are.
I think that's probably one of my biggest goals.
I would agree that trauma plays a huge part in this, but it being from society not accepting them, I'm not sure that's the trauma that is actually at play here.
Us on the left,
I mean, I could be wrong. I could be wrong.
politicians,
I can accept
the
that.
medical associations, the schools, to walk this back and to be honest about the complexity of it. I want liberals to make room for gender diversity, and that includes masculine girls and feminine boys, without telling them that they need to leave their sex category because they are different. I want them to understand that there are many ways to treat gender dysphoria if a child does have it.
Young people are right at that moment in life when they're looking for meaning. That's why, you know, one of the most common novels is a coming of age novel. Coming of age is a time when we discover who we are. It's a time when we grapple with our purpose. And it's a dark time. It's really scary to grapple with a sense of meaning and purpose. we sort of make light of it in a way. It's adolescent angst. But when you're going through it, it doesn't feel like a funny trope. It feels deadly serious.
That's what I was saying at the beginning of this.
And Jung said that most of our problems are because we've lost a sense of meaning. And I certainly find that in the people that come to me for therapy.
That's also what I said earlier.
So I'm always interested in addressing
Son of a bitch.
psychological
I'm a
distress
genius.
with psychological interventions. And I'm talking about looking at it as a sickness of soul that can be healed with connection, that can be healed with relationship, that can be healed with compassion, that can be healed with understanding, and that can be healed with a confrontation with one's sense of meaning and purpose.
Stock footage. Changing the game. Oh, there we go. The epilogue. Oh, well, we're not gonna read all that stuff. I'm sure it's all great though. All right, guys, it's been fun. I hope you enjoyed that documentary. Like I said, I just found that like an hour before I started the stream. So obviously I didn't have time to watch it. I just saw the trailer for it and I was like, why not? Let's give it a try. It wasn't bad for, some little independent production. It was actually pretty good. I've seen worse. In fact, I was looking at potentially, instead of watching that, watching a documentary about how the Uvalde, Texas shooting was a hoax. And I thought that would have been fun, but the documentary was just really lazy. It was mostly just showing clips of the interviews with parents and saying that they weren't sad enough, so that proves that it was a hoax. While I was really, really hoping for more of a, it was aliens or Bigfoot or lizard people or the Illuminati is really what I was looking for. That would have been a fun one to watch, but that's not what it was. It was just kind of one of those, thrown together by some guy real quick of just clips and saying, open your mind, take the red pill. Anyway, I hope you guys had a good time. Hope you enjoyed the documentary. I said it wasn't that bad. Make sure you've liked the stream, and I'll see you guys on TikTok Tuesday. We'll be back on TikTok Tuesday. I'll see you next time.